stuff, going on in the voting realm right now. Maine took a huge step yesterday. The Maine legislature yesterday passed a provision or a law, basically, saying that when other states that represent 270 electoral college votes, excuse me, let me rephrase that they're joining the other states that right now is at 209, and they want to get it up to 270. When the majority of the country votes for somebody, then these states representing right now 209 electoral votes, but it'll become operational when they hit 270, that these states will give their electoral votes to whoever won the majority vote in the United States. In other words, back when in 2000, for example, George W. Bush lost that election by 500,000 votes, but he ended up in the White House because of the Electoral College. Well, under this provision, and similarly in 2016, Donald Trump lost the popular vote, the national vote, by 3 million votes. He lost the election by 3 million votes, and yet he was also in the White House. And, I mean, in fact, the last time a Republican was actually elected with a majority of Americans say, yes, we want this person for president, was 1988, George Herbert Walker Bush. That was the last time a Republican was actually elected president. Can you imagine how different America would be if Bush and Trump had not served? We wouldn't have had the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. We wouldn't have a right-wing Supreme Court right now. Abortion would still be, controlled by Roe v. Wade. In other words, largely legal until viability with some restrictions. The nation would not be $32 trillion, $34 trillion in debt. We never would have had the Bush tax cuts, and we never would have had the Trump tax cuts. You wouldn't have exploding billionaires, that is to say the number of billionaires exploding and the wealth of billionaires exploding, and because of those massive tax cuts by George W. Bush and Donald Trump. I mean, America would just be a very different place. All the states, the Supreme Court would not have ruled that you can't expand Obamacare via Medicaid to all the states, so everybody in America would have health care right now. If we had just put the people in the White House that the majority of Americans voted for. Well, this interstate compact is the way of making that happen. And Maine signed on yesterday, and it looks like Michigan is going to sign on very quickly. The legislation is moving through their legislature. That will take us to 225 states. And now we're kind of hitting the wall because, the states that we need now have Republicans controlling either one branch of their legislature or their governor's mansion. And as a result, they're not going to join the interstate compact because Republicans hate this. In fact, Trump's whole strategy to win in 2024 is based on not winning the popular vote. He's expecting to lose it by millions and millions of votes, but by winning the Electoral College in a handful of states, 5, 6, 7 states. And, and thus he's getting all these billionaires to pledge all this dark money. I mean, this election this year, it's going to be very interesting. We're going to see the Democratic Party, which is doing really great fundraising. You're going to see the Democratic Party running actual ads and running things through the Federal Election Commission, being honest and transparent. And you're going to see the Republican Party doing very, very little. But you're going to see the consequences of mind-boggling billions of dollars in dark money that is unaccountable. You don't know where it came from. Some of it may well have come from foreign governments. Citizens United legalized that. As John Paul Stevens pointed out in his dissent, he said this decision would have legalized Tokyo Rose, in fact. So you're going to see, we're just going to see the country being swamped with dark money. It's going to be a real test of our democracy. But anyhow, we need to fix the Electoral College, or we need to essentially get rid of it. And the way to do this is through this nationalpopularvote.com. You can find it. And the reason I'm highlighting this is twofold. Number one, Maine just did it. Michigan's about to do it. So it's kind of in the news. It's a newsworthy moment. But the second reason, and I think this is a very important one, is that we really have a possibility of pulling this thing off. It's entirely possible that because abortion is going to be on the ballot in so many of these red states, I mean, we just saw this in Florida this week, right? that the state Supreme Court said, yes, you can have abortion on the ballot, that you're going to have huge turnout that might flip the state blue. I mean, you know, you're still going to have DeSantis as governor, I believe, for another 2 years, but, you know, that's not the case in every red state across the country, and there's a very real possibility the Democrats are going to pick up a couple of more states. And if they do and they can get them into the interstate compact, hey, good news. Especially Texas. Texas would be huge, although I'm not sure if Greg Abbott is up for re-election or not. Texas is going to be, you know, it's going to be tough to dislodge the Republicans there because they've done such a good job of suppressing the vote and purging the voter rolls. The same thing going on in Georgia. You know, we're expecting at least 1 million people to be purged from the Georgia voting rolls this year. And they just passed legislation making it even easier to purge people from the voting roll. But in any case, check out the list over at nationalpopularvote.com. It's fascinating, and I think that this is something that we should be planning for. We need to get ready for it. So that's my rant today over at HartmannReport.com. Are Republicans starting to realize that Donald Trump and MAGA Republicans are dancing to Putin's tune? Sounds like it. The House Foreign Affairs Committee, the chairman is a Republican from Texas by the name of Michael McCaul. Not Michael McFaul. He's the former U.S. ambassador to Russia who shows up on MSNBC all the time. Michael McCaul is a conservative Republican from Texas. He describes himself as a Reagan Republican. And Reagan was no fan of the Soviet Union, as you'll recall. So this is what the Puck News Washington correspondent reported. Well, actually, I'll skip over that. McCall said, I think Russian propaganda has made its way into the United States, unfortunately, and it's infected a good chunk of my party's base. He's specifically talking about Republicans who don't want to send more aid to Ukraine, but he's more generally talking about other issues as well. He says, unlike 1939, we want to provide deterrence so that we don't have to send anyone over there, because the next thing the Russians will do is attack Moldova, Georgia, and then part of the Baltics, or at least provoke a lot. So I think it's just preventative. And this is like the most rational argument for Ukraine aid, is that if you stop Russia and Ukraine, we're not going to have to fight a war with Russia. But if you don't stop Russia and Ukraine, Putin and his generals have already made it very clear that Moldova and Poland are next, and possibly the Baltic states, particularly Latvia, Lithuania, well, all three of them, Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia, the three Baltic states. So, you know, I suppose you could say Finland is too, but in any case, that's what's going on, and he goes on to say, there's a new wing of isolationism, and it takes you again back to the 1930s. That was not helpful. But we had been involved earlier and provided that, had we been involved earlier, he's talking about World War II. He says, you know, I understand, he says he understands the pacifism in the Republican Party in the late 1930s, early 1940s, because World War I had been such a bloody war. But then he goes on to say, you know, Americans were like, we don't want to have to go over there and save Europe again, but had we been involved earlier and provided that deterrence, we could have saved a lot of blood and treasure. Spot on. I mean, this is, you know, he goes on to say, I just see so many parallels between then and what's happening right now. And if we fail in this aid package and Putin does take Ukraine, and it won't take him very long, then where will the United States be? Yeah, I'm telling you, this is one of the major issues of our time. And Donald Trump, because he is beholden to Vladimir Putin. I mean, you know, his little enterprise, his little social media enterprise, according to some news reports, has been bailed out or kept alive on life support by Russian American who has ties to, you know, one of the big cheeses in Russian intelligence. I mean, how it's like Trump is constantly, everything that Trump does, it seems these days, either has money from Saudi Arabia or money from Russia attached to it. You know, how much longer can we tolerate that sort of thing? I mean, this is just crazy. C-R-A-Z-Y. In a big way. So, might the FCC bring back net neutrality? What is net neutrality, after all? It's been a couple of years since we've had this debate. It was 2015, I think? No, it was, I'll have to look it up. Whatever year Trump did away with net neutrality. I think maybe it was 2017. But anyhow, we'll be right back with that story. Stay with us.